I always sleep well and and the only times I don't is when I'm anxious. It's not super complicated. And I've had a couple of major things in my life through the years that have made me anxious, and I don't sleep as well. It's not super complicated. Mm-hmm. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think when you were just talking, and this has always been a big thing for me, I love my process. When you were talking being, right, the water, like that's the only thing I've ever done. It's why I've been so specific is the word I would use. Such a bad student when I'm not a dope and I could have easily done it. But I had so much conviction in the passion of my process that I was willing to punt school to work on my skill of observing people and doing entrepreneurship, whether that was baseball cards or reading sports card magazines or reading wine magazines when I got into wine. I've always been so into the process of, I enjoyed and continue to enjoy when I'm underestimated and not paid attention to far more than the alternative. Mm-hmm. I get great pleasure out of the early days of Wine Library when nobody knew who I was, building. I'm a builder. Yes. Building that business. I don't need the accolades. I don't need the attention. I don't need the trophies. I don't need the money. I need my process. And I think that's what you're referring to. And when you're about the process versus what the process gives you, I think the relationship changes dramatically. I often say like my ambitions are to be one of the great entrepreneurs of all time. And I get met by a lot of my friends and definitely by the comments section of social media with incredible amounts of resistance of no around, well, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Oprah, they're gonna make more money. And I'm like, you've defined the greatest entrepreneur based on money. I've defined, for me, the greatest entrepreneur is the one who, because I agree at some level if you're gonna say that, you can't say you're the greatest singer of all time and not have a Grammy or a hit sing. Like there is market dynamics that you have to respect. And I respect that. I think I will be financially successful enough to get into the debate when my career is over, I don't see anyone as passionate of giving free game at scale on a daily basis and really meaning it in the macro and the micro. And I believe that. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm very busy and my time is extremely valuable. When I do this podcast, again, I do it because I like you and I'm cheering for you.
And I appreciate you.
I'm being very frank. I'm not unaware that there are going to be new people listening that didn't listen the first time, or maybe I say something a different way and they've come into this not liking me, but they love you and they're like, wait a minute, I know that. But I also know that a fresh interview with me gives you leverage to get the next guest. Like I'm aware of that. And so to me, that defines me as a great entrepreneur, somebody who's trying to put other people on in all his activities, whether that's financially, whether that's giving something, I'd rather give you $10,000 in cash for this podcast than be on it for these 45 minutes because I can do more with that. Money, so sometimes it's money, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's a public cosign. I'll give you another thing. Sometimes it's already happened with you, for example. Sometimes it's saying something behind the scenes when someone's debating to do this or not. And I'm just using you. We've interacted so little. This happens to me times 100,000 a month.
Yep.
And I think good intent, karma, caring about others, self-esteem and self-confidence that you can get yours without tearing anyone else down gets you into a place where you want to build everyone else up. I talk a lot about living in a cocoon. Mm-hmm. Like if you go to search.GaryVaynerchuk.com, I have a search engine. If you search cocoon, you'll be stunned how often I say that. And that's what you just said. I believe so much of my happiness has been living in a cocoon, which is wild because I also think I'm an incredibly successful voice of the current.
Yeah, you're a people person.
I'm a people person. So I know what's going on. I'm not affected by what's going on. I know what's going on Clubhouse. I know what's going on VR. I know who's popping in hip hop and in sports and in influencers. I know what's going on in geopolitics. I'm like really awake to so much, but completely detached from.
Yes. And that's beautiful. I fucking love that.
I think so.
You see, it's the same thing. Like when you focus on poverty, it brings more poverty. What we need to focus on is the solution to poverty, whether that's education or schools or jobs or career or anything. There's so many different things like COVID. I'm not consumed by it. I know that it's going on in the world and everyone who's consumed by it is affected by it. What's my solution to it? I can help people financially. I can, educate them on getting their mind right. I can send them mindful meditations. I can have them, put their mind into thinking about health or better health instead of, because for me, I know, again, I'm practically spiritually, but illnesses are physical manifestations in the body, which to tell you to stop doing what you're doing emotionally, physically,
100%.
environmentally.
I believe in that.
So that's
I believe in math and art. I believe in black and white and gray. I think the reason people struggle with a lot of what we're talking about here when we go into this realm is because they choose sides.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, and I don't know all the details. Do I believe that you can just sit there and will it mentally? Sometimes. I really genuinely, I don't know what, I'm sorry, I'm on the record. Sometimes I believe the brain can. Do I believe that's always the answer? No, I do not. I think sometimes math is a good answer. You got to figure out when and how and what, but once we become a culture of and versus or, this is a very big point of mine in general. Something I'm going to be talking about more because I just unveiled it a little bit here with a little more oomph. I say it a lot, but I'm starting to really get it. I'm like, wait a minute. The reason so much works for me is I live in and all these people want it to be or. They're so obsessed with it to be one or the other when it is always and. Even if you think about our religious divides, our racial divides, our social divides, our country, America has a racist issue, Europe has an anti-Semitic issue, right?
Yep.
It's because of or.
Yes. Yep.
Why can't it be and?
I think that my perspective of how I live is I don't know shit about anything. And there's beauty in that. The old me used to fear the unknown. Now I fucking love it. I'm welcoming it with open arm. Bring it, because I don't know anything. This is great. And I think it puts you on a level plateau of being
one of the things that I do worry about, being transparent, is I get mad when people think I'm egotistical because I'm so conviction oriented.
Yeah.
Because really, if you asked me, speak about traits that got you here, I would argue humility is at the top. Humility and patience. Yet, I seem frantic and borderline egotistical on almost every video clip because I'm passionate, conviction, and I'm fast.
Mm-hmm.
So my human manifestation of communication style is one thing. My actions as a human are completely the opposite.
See, I don't see that but then again, I read outside, you don't lead with ego. Otherwise you would attract egotistical situations to you, and that's just not who you are.
You're uncomfortably thoughtful on this issue, my friend.
I mean,
I think you could, without you being humble or me flattering, I think you're pretty aware that you come at it a little bit different than the masses.
Yeah.
Luckily, I think I'm also interesting enough that makes people look a second or third time. And most people are intuitive enough that if they get enough context, they're like, wait a minute, I also probably in a weird way manifest a little bit of the underestimation. I do think I'm extremely attracted to the underdog situation because of all my circumstances. And I sometimes wonder if I a little bit, for example, you may know this since you consume it, you've got a lot of context. My team is so frustrated that I don't talk about being smart. The number one conversation with my inner circle in my content is you don't tell people you're smart. And I rebuttal with, how is that going to bring anyone value?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've gotten smarter in the rebuttal, which is hey, that validation might help you affect more people. And then you start having the game of who do you get, who do you don't get, and you go through that whole thing. But, I get it. And I think you're right. But I also know that most people can't see that.
Yeah. And I don't think you need to say, I mean, I never went to school. I know you didn't. So I never believed I was smart because I didn't have the accreditation up until a certain point. And I was like, actually,
same.
No,
what is smart mean?
experiences you have make you intelligent.
Yeah, of course. Wait a minute. Yeah. Why was I successful, both financial and happiness, a lot more than almost the rest of my high school combined class? You know, like you start getting more thoughtful and wisdom oriented. You start realizing the framework of life is different. You start building on that. You know, I also think you have to be careful not to overjudge yourself. It is okay to be looking at your phone around something you're doing in your life at the expense of your young child who just wants your attention. Now, it's not okay to do that for a sustained period of time where you now have neglect on your child. But I watch parents go the reverse, my friend, where they like beat themselves up for a 40-second lapse. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you? And I think it's back to finding that balance, because I think you're right. You know, you want to get something on the podcast, prep for a podcast, and you're like, wait a minute, I should sit 16 more minutes with Darling. This is something I'll always remember. Plus, I'm putting deposits in a relationship I'm going to care much more about than if I did a solid interview with Garyvee. Yes. I think that's absolutely right. I also try, when we talk about things like this, to bring up the counter like I just did, which is like, and sometimes it's okay to be selfish for your own ambitions and your own process. Find your balance. Make sure you're not consistently doing one end or the other.